This week we had two national rankings being announced, the literacy rankings and the ease of doing business rankings. And these two presented an absolute study in contrasts. Kerala, as expected, topped the literacy ranking with 96.2% literates in the state, while at the bottom of that list was Andhra Pradesh with only 66.4% literates. But in the ease of doing business ranking, these positions were literally reversed, with Andhra Pradesh coming up topper and Kerala ending up at 28th position, the last but one on the list. We've all heard of some class toppers not doing very well in life. So is Kerala one such case? Welcome to Geometric View. Of course, the rankings don't come as a complete surprise. From the time that Kottayam became the first fully literate town in India, Kerala has been the country's literacy leader. And the state has never been a major investment destination. So we have some of the larger enterprises promoted by Keralites, like an MRF or a Lulu Group, being headquartered outside the state. To put a finger on why exactly India's literacy leader is a business backbencher, I asked some people who have their fingers on Kerala's business pulse, and I got these explanations. One, profit is a bad word. Consultant and founding CEO of the Technopark, India's first IT park, G. Vijay Raghavan, says, post-independence, there has been an extreme socialistic mindset in Kerala, which makes profit a bad word in the state. And therefore, unlike the literacy movement, which had people's participation in it, there has been no such groundswell for private investment in Kerala.
Business, we somehow have always looked at business profit as a bad word. And then you go back to see why did this happen? Actually, post-independence, Kerala had, you had communism, you had the socialist movement. That means, whether it was a Congress or it was a CPM, it was always meant to be an organization for the poor. We believe only in socialism. Capitalism is something very bad. When capitalism is bad, then that means business is bad. When business is bad, what do? To make it difficult for business to really come.
Number two, policies that are paper tigers. Like some class toppers who know all the theory but not their application, Kerala has made some fabulous policy interventions. For example, the state claims that it was the first in the country to introduce a single window clearance system for investors, meaning a one-touch point for investors to clear all their approvals. But the ground reality is quite different. Navas Miran, chairman of Eastern Condiments, in which Norway's Orkla announced it was going to pick up a 67.8% equity this week, valuing Eastern Condiments at 20 billion rupees, has this to say.
The industrial policy which has been created by the government of Kerala, it's a real good policy if you have a real check comparing it with other states. But to me, I think it's mostly the issue of implementation, and that's where we are finding it difficult. If at all the sentiments are bad, that is basically because of that.
The single window clearances that we talk about actually are not single windows. You go into one window and then you see several windows and doors. You have to go to all of them and you see another set coming up. So really we have not implemented in the spirit of what the intention was.
Number three, literate but not educated. A popular Malayalam saying goes, a textbook cow does not eat grass, emphasizing the great divide between theory and practice. In this case, between literacy and education. CII Kerala former chairman and industrialist P. Ganesh, feels Kerala has some way to travel from literacy to education.
Kerala is the most literate state, but I would say it's not an educated state. People know only to read and write, but not properly educated, so that correct decisions can be taken at the correct point of time. Both the LDF and UDF have been in power in alternate, but they have not done anything very credible for the cause of business. Being a socialistic state with a socialistic mindset of the population, nothing great has been done to improve the business sentiments in the state for the last 73 years.
Number 4, a promiser-approver disconnect. Chairman of CII's Kerala State Council, Thomas John Muthoot, feels there is a disconnect between those who make promises to investors and those who have to give approvals to their projects. For example, the Chief Minister or the Chief Secretary may welcome investors to the state, but the local body official need not offer such warmth. So there's this joke going on in Kerala that if China is making incursions into India, let them take all the land that they want, but they're going to learn a good lesson when they go to register that land with the village officer.
The system is something which is very old. So you'll be surprised that to put up a building in the heart of Trivandrum city, and if you have a basement for car parking, that means you have to remove the soil from there. You need approval from the mining and geology department. If you need that, you need a certificate from the village office to say that there is no scheduled tribe individual living in a certain radius around that place. That is the kind of laws that we have.
Number 5, red carpet, red flags, red tape. Traditionally, Kerala has laid out a red carpet for investors like every other investment destination tries to do. But investors have for long been worried about the red flags, the red unions. But today, they're not just scared about the left unions, but also about the Congress trade union and the BJP trade union and the trade unions of several other parties. On top of that, they have to worry about many bureaucrats who are either suspicious about investors or corrupt or both.
The bureaucracy, somehow, just like society, has looked at businessmen with suspicion. And when I talk of the businessmen with suspicion, it's because we believe that anyone who employs a few people is a modalali. And he is there to exploit the worker who is called a toilali. So everyone in business is exploiting the worker. That is a kind of mindset which we were brought up with. And that is something which is reflected in the bureaucracy. So if there is a taxi driver who owns 2 taxis, he drives his own taxi, and the other one, he employs someone, he is still a modalali. There's an auto rickshaw driver with 3 or 4 auto rickshaws, and one of them he drives himself, he is still a modalali. He is not looked at as a toilali anymore. So that mindset has got into the bureaucracy, and the bureaucracy look at businessmen with suspicion, because of which the approvals, they take their own sweet time to give.
Number 6, woos many but wins just a few. Kerala is often like a young man wooing just about every damsel in town. So in pre-independent India, Travancore tried to get none less than Albert Einstein to be the Vice Chancellor of Kerala University. Fabulous vision, but hardly pragmatic. Similarly, some years ago, Kerala tried to get BMW to invest in the state. But as luck would have it, the day the BMW delegation was visiting Kerala, there was a hartal, and the team just disappeared. These days, Kerala is organizing grandiose business meets like the Global Investors Meet, the Emerging Kerala Meet, and earlier this year, the Ascend Kerala 2020. But one just can't hide everything under the red carpets. Around the same time that Ascend Kerala 2020 was happening, there was a crippling hartal in the state, which all investors could come to know. And around the same time, George Alexander Muthoot, Managing Director of Muthoot Finance, was assaulted in broad daylight in Kerala's commercial capital. No wonder when such investor meets are held these days, Keralites are reminded of a popular Malayalam movie dialogue, എത്ര മനോഹരമായ നടക്കാത്ത സ്വപ്നം. What a beautiful impractical dream. So who do we compare Kerala to? I would say this week Kerala has a strong comparison to the world number one tennis player Novak Djokovic. Djokovic held the Adria Tour, a charity tennis tournament in Serbia and Croatia in the middle of the pandemic. The tournament could not be completed because it turned out into a veritable coronavirus cluster. And from there he flies to the United States to play the US Open, where he hits a reckless shot that catches the throat of the line umpire and he is disqualified. Kerala has been quite like Djokovic this week. The state started out as a number one and role model in fighting the coronavirus pandemic in India. But this week, the state is actually one of the worry points for the rest of the country in terms of sheer numbers of rising cases. And quite as crazily as Djokovic decided to hold a tournament in the middle of the pandemic, Kerala, on top of all the policemen it had, brought out commandos to fight the pandemic. And just like Djokovic was reckless in hitting that shot which caught the throat of the line umpire, Kerala has been reckless in handling two of its key revenue sources, namely liquor sales and tourism, both out of the severity of the lockdown and administrative inefficiency. Make no mistake, nobody can doubt the abilities of Novak Djokovic and his stature as the number one tennis player in the world. Similarly, nobody can suspect the competence of Kerala, which is number one in various areas. This week, both Djokovic and Kerala will be seen as globally brilliant bunglers with an outstanding capacity to mess up. Thank you.